G'day, everyone. Welcome to the Michael West live stream podcast. Great creators. First one of whom is David Cox, the creator of Auspol Explained. You might have seen him on YouTube or maybe on his podcast series. He's been demystifying Australian politics since 2019. G'day, David. How are you? Yeah, David?
I'm good.
Sweet.
How you doing?
Nice little entry there. I like that. Keep me on my toes.
Smooth.
Yeah. We also have Leonardo Puglisi. I'm sure everyone has heard of this little guy. Sorry for calling you little. That was a bit mean. He is, in fact, Australia's brightest emerging psephologist. I hope I said that right, Leo. And the founder of 6 News Australia. If you're there, Leo, hello.
Yeah, great to be here.
Great. Cool. So, firstly tonight, I want to talk just briefly with Michael about a story on the website that we have on Michael West Media, investigating groups like Advance Australia. I'm sure the viewers will remember them. They campaigned for the No campaign quite heavily and did some pretty dodgy billboards and stuff like that in 2022 against some of the Climate 200 candidates, calling David Pocock a green, that sort of thing. On the website, Wendy Bacon, one of our journalists, has done some investigating about another group, which I haven't heard of before, called Better Australia. Can you tell us a little bit about that story, Michael?
Yeah, it's worth a read, Steph. Better Australia. So Wendy Bacon, the great Wendy Bacon, and Yaakov Aharon did the rounds over the past week at the election booths and spoke to a few people and dropped some notes of minutes of meeting. And these, funnily enough, the Labor Party backroom guy, Eric Rosendahl, who was former New South Wales Treasurer, was at this meeting with ScoMo's, Scott Morrison's former private secretary, a guy called Yaron Finkelstein, who's got sort of coal lobby connections and so on. So you've got Labor and Liberal teaming up with a mob called Better Australia, effectively to bag the Teals and the Greens. So, you know, it's this war by the uni party or the majors to attack independents and minor parties. So it's very interesting. So they've got the full drill on that on the website. And these guys, funnily enough, have got the same sort of agenda. We couldn't get to their funding links. Of course, the dodgy political donations laws means that we probably won't be able to find out until next January, and then even then not much because there's such a lag in disclosure. But the guts of it is that you've got the fossil fuel funding in advance, allied now with the pro-Israel funding on the right to attack the Teals and the Greens, and Better Australia, which has been working very hard in Wentworth this week at Sydney's eastern suburbs, is also working on the same principle. So that sort of thing is going on. When I say astroturfing groups, I mean fake community grassroots organisations, for those people that haven't heard of astroturfing.
Yeah, wow. I can't believe they're joining forces. I haven't heard of that before. I think we've got a video here, a little promo, if we could play that one. I'd like to check it out. It's very interesting.
Got the sound?
Yeah, I can't hear it. Joshy?
Might have to jump that. So there's a lot of smeary politics going on at this election. It is going to be very hard fought.
Do you really think it's going to be? I think that it hasn't been as bad as it was in 2019. I think that was, for me, the worst one. I mean, I guess the attacks against the independents in 2022 were pretty bad, but they hadn't, it was just sort of a first year that they had really risen up. So I feel like Scott Morrison, particularly being, you know, the guy that he was against Bill Shorten and the housing thing like that. Yeah, 2019 was pretty brutal for me. I mean, we've got Clive Palmer back again doing the same shtick that he always does. He's dumped the United Australia Party and got this new one, Trumpeter Patriots. I'm not sure where that leaves Senator Ralph Babette. But, you've seen Clive do this sort of thing sort of since 2013, probably before that as well with the mining tax. Why does he keep on getting people to come into Parliament if he just abandons them when they get in? Like, what's he going to...
His crowning achievement, Steph, of spending 120 million to get one guy in, being Ralph Babbitt, is a bit of a failure, really, of course, and it's not money well spent. But
no, not at all.
Right now, all he's doing simply is to coalesce the parties of the right, the Hanson Party and Libertarians.
But do you think he's aiming to actually get anything up? Because I think in 2013 it was really around, he does mining. I'm pretty sure that's what he does. So the mining tax, he was getting something out of it. In 2019, it was preference deals. I remember that was the thing. He was putting the pressure on the coalition to, preference him and get in. I don't think he won any seats that election, but regardless, does he do it for sport? I just can't work it out.
There may be a bit of sport in it, but essentially he's a very transactional guy, of course, and made a lot of money. So he's got a lot of cash, and it gets him a seat at the table if you can get people into Parliament. So that when there is a political debate that affects his financial interests, he's got champions there to pursue his causes. So it helps. But I think there's a lot of populism in it as well. He wants to be seen as a good guy, and he's got people liking him on the right. Unfortunately for him, the timing of the Trump thing, Trump turning into such a disaster, such chaos, doesn't help them run that Trumpist conspiratorial deep state line. It's not completely meritless, of course. The system is, with two-party states in Australia and America, it's pretty old and decrepit now, and it's not working for younger people particularly. That's one of our sort of, world-weary points that we make all the time, whether it's housing or whatever, superannuation. But the fact is that he's just capitalising on disaffection, and he's got the cash to do it.
Yeah, right. Okay, that makes sense. He gets kind of a discount, they have those $10,000 dinners and stuff. I suppose if they're, paying him to turn up, not that he needs the money. He's a lot less sort of intimidating than he used to be for me as well. I think it's funny to see him kicking around doing his 30-minute YouTube ads and stuff like that. God bless him, I say. Oh, that's a good segue, actually. Speaking of God, I'm not sure if Josh has this link or not for us, but it's just a funny thing I saw today. On Twitter, which was the cover of the Canberra Times. I meant to go out and get myself a copy, which was a lovely tribute to Pope Francis. And then the bottom fifth of the page there is just Clive doing his thing, which is pretty good.
So the latest news on Clive today is that Clive is complaining that the Trumpeter Patriots, his Trumpeter Patriots party, was hacked because all these people found the missives from his party saying, put climate 200, put the teal second on, preference them second on your how to votes. Yeah. And so all these people have got onto him and said, what are you doing preferencing those greenies, And so it's very funny. He's claiming he was hacked, but it sounds to me, there's no evidence of it that we've seen yet. So it sounds to me as though he hasn't been hacked, but some smart ass has just gone and rabbled him by putting out a Twitter profile or something, or a fake email with the Trumpeter Patriots brandings on it, and told them to vote for Simon Holmes Accord second. But essentially,
hang on. I thought I saw an article this morning from 6 News actually about that preference thing. I didn't read the entire thing, so maybe Leo did cover the hack. I'm not sure if he's got him on camera there. Have you got that article, Josh, from 6 News?
Let's get Leo.
Let me find it. Yeah, we can get Leo on to chat about it really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to jump into it, you can get it on 6newsau.com. But what I will say is, it is legitimate. The stuff about Teal Independent second, that was legitimate Trumpet of Patriots. There's no hack. There's no fraud. There's no parody account. That is 100% what they're putting in and what they're continuing to put out. Because they've got this policy of put the coalition, or I think in general they just say put the incumbent last, which they've done in most seats with the exception of as far as I can find, Monash and also Kennedy. They've done it in Kennedy. They put Bob Catter last. But no, and so this has gotten a lot of backlash from the freedom movement, the right-wing minor parties, because they are putting Greens ahead of Nationals and Labor in like the key seat of Richmond. They're putting Deb Leonard, a Climate 200 supported independent, above Russell Broadbent, who is usually pretty friendly with those in the teal movement in Monash. I don't understand why they're doing it. They're claiming, again, some kind of interference. But what I'll say about that is that, and we mentioned it, there's a recent article that was out maybe about 6 hours ago on the 6 News website as well. They made this particular claim about Griffith. So Griffith obviously being held by Max Chandler Mather. And they said, okay, so they seem to say this was part of the interfered how to vote cards, which is interesting because like 2 days before they were publicly defending the decision to put Labor second in Griffith. Now they put the LNP ahead of Labor there, but they were repeatedly publicly defending it. So I'm not so sure what's happened there, but it's just their how to vote stances have just changed so significantly. And you've had one candidate quit about it, and it wouldn't surprise me if others go as well.
What a mess. It's always funny that, I can see on that first article, the candidate said that one of the conditions that he was going to run was that they would put the Teals last. Huh.
Yeah, well, we spoke to that candidate, Mark Aldridge, who he hasn't withdrawn yet, but we spoke to him on 6 News on air yesterday, and he said he was pretty unhappy with it. I think he did get Labor last in his seat, but he said no, he was unhappy with it, and that is clearly the mood from like everyone in the freedom movement at the moment. It's pretty inexplicable decisions, but again, some of it just doesn't make sense. Like again, why would you have Russell Broadbent below the teal independent? Like,
Broadbent
I've
is running
never
as an
seen anything
independent,
like it.
right?
Yeah, he is. So after
Yeah.
that Lib defection, he's run as that independent, and
I
again,
think
for
he
some
lost
reason,
pre-selection.
yeah, and exactly, and for some reason they've decided to put a teal independent above him for reasons
Maybe he thinks
can't
that they had a
explain.
better chance.
Well, perhaps we could get good old David on to explain some of the oddities in the preferencing
Yeah,
system.
now we're
Because
talking about
basically
preferences.
a lot of horse trading going on, and some, as Leo says, some things just seem astounding. Why, for instance, if you were Trumpeter Patriots, you're on the right, why you wouldn't have the Libs up the top, that sort of thing. So, David, can you just give us some elementary explanations for people that aren't that au fait with the preferential voting system?
Well, good question. Really, like how to vote cards are suggestions on how to put your preferences, and the effectiveness actually like very much varies. You find that it's more effective for like major parties, probably because they have the resources to actually distribute a lot of them. And Clive Palmer is famously not short on resources, so I can't say anything about his particular motivations about his use of how to vote cards, but when it is a tight race, those sort of suggestions on how to preference something, especially for voters who aren't particularly like opinionated, they're like, well, I like this party, but I don't care about the other ones. If they just like, okay, this is how I support this party, those sort of how to vote cards may be instrumental. So
that's really interesting, actually. I can't recall if the Climate 200 independents, if they ever had preferences, but I think a few of them now are not running any. Is that right? Leo would know that.
Yeah, I think by my memory, it's the same here because I'm in Kooyong with Monique Ryan. Generally same at the state elections as well. They just say one and go whatever the rest for the other numbers, which I think that does get some criticism, because you're like, well, for instance, like Ellie Smith in Dixon, you're like, well, why wouldn't you forcefully make sure you don't encourage voters to put Dutton up there? But look, I mean, it avoids them being linked to Labor and the Greens, which is obviously the main kind of
I think it's kind of
against them.
smart, actually, for them not to have any other numbers, because we've just heard about Clive Palmer and all this. Every year there's a fight over who's getting number one, and someone's quit and all this stuff. So, the Teals sort of have that integrity thing that they do, and it kind of holds up when you see the rest of them squabbling over first, second, third preference things like that. Maybe that's a part of it. just getting
Yeah,
away
again,
so they don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, it avoids that discourse, and it's interesting because as David said, right, was the figures from Kevin Bonham on Twitter the other day were also interesting. That the rate of how to vote cards being followed in the House, it's about 45% for major parties, about 15% or less for anyone else. In the Senate, it's about 25 to 30 for majors, 10% for Greens, and a few percent for most others. So people think it is like a vast, like 90% follow how to vote cards to a T. That's just not the case. And as David said, and should be encouraged, I think the terminology around it in public discourse is a bit annoying at times. But, as has been rightly pointed out, they're suggestions, they're recommendations, with the exception of the Victorian State Upper House and Melbourne City Council. There is absolutely no way for your preferences to be controlled at this election. I think that's something that everyone should remember.
But I suppose
Everyone
just
should remember that.
to wind that back a bit, just for those people that are coming in fresh or voting for the first time. I mean, the real, you can put whoever you want down, you can preference whoever you want, but if you're not au fait with the political system, and as Rex Patrick famously says, 20% of people are interested in politics, and the other 80% decide the outcome. So preferences have an impact, but as you guys say, it varies in different races, and different kinds of electorates. But has there been academic studies done on it in the past as to the power of preferences? David?
Well, I'm not entirely sure about academic studies on the power of preferences, but preferences can be quite significant. Like linking it back to our good friend Clive Palmer, he actually was elected in 2013 to the seat of Fairfax, and he won by 57 votes. Now, the thing is, like we don't use first past the post. Like, in first past the post, right? Like the person who gets you just vote for one person, and the person who gets the most wins. They don't need a majority. In 2013, Clive Palmer's opponent, the Liberal National Party member Ted O'Brien, got over 12,500 more first preferences. But all the other smaller parties, their preferences flowed towards Clive Palmer, and that's what elected him by a margin of 57. And also there were over 4,500 informal votes, and like the turnout was 93%. So your comment of like, X amount of people care about politics, and then the result is decided by this huge amount that don't care, is actually quite true. I've been looking into the margins recently of the last election, and it got to a point I was trying to figure out, like, how many seats is the margin smaller than the amount of people who did not show up, and it eventually became the opposite. Instead of trying to figure out like that number, it started becoming, okay, how many seats actually have a margin larger than that? Like, let's go the other direction. It's scores. It's over 50. It's well over 50, maybe over 60, 70 seats that are determined by a margin smaller than the amount of people that don't show up. So
that don't show up to vote, you mean?
Yeah. So that don't show up to vote. So preferences are incredibly significant. They can override a margin of over 10,000 quite easily in these races. People should actually pay attention to who they're preferencing, and also go vote, because it is a massive determiner of who wins, especially given that the past several elections, the government has won by 1 or 2 seats. So, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, the eternal 48-52 poll and all of that stuff. And that's preferences total, right? Not just like the people who follow how to vote cards. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't break it down in that way. I wish they would. I wish we could get some demographics on that. That would be very interesting, because I'm not sure that the how to vote cards that parties put out are particularly effective at all. And there's so much discourse around them. But really, I see a lot of discourse around people saying, oh, you have to vote one. If you don't vote one, then there's no chance of getting in, when really, obviously, you can put 2 and then, you might have a chance of still winning, right? We have those 3-cornered contests where some come in from 3rd place. I have to look up how this stuff works every election cycle, I swear to God, because it gets kind of complicated, I bet that you'd be able to rattle it off though, David.
Absolutely. So let's imagine that we're in a contest. Let's imagine there's 5 candidates. Let's say someone called Josh gets 5%. Someone called David gets 10% of the first preferences. Someone called Leo 10% as well. Steph 35% and Michael 40.
It's not bad.
Yeah. Congratulations, Steph. You've done it
Yeah,
pretty
thank
well.
you.
You haven't won.
It's a hard campaign. Full credit to the
No,
boys.
Yeah, no one's got a majority in this situation. I mean, Michael has the most votes overall. So if we were doing first past the post, he would just win outright, done, even though 60% of the electorate didn't vote for him. So the way that preferential voting works is you rank all these candidates, and if no one has a majority, they eliminate the lowest person. So Josh has 5% of the vote, he's done. Let's say that 2% goes to me, David, 3% of his vote goes to Leo, none to Steph or Michael. They don't like you. Before David and Leo are tied on 10%, but now I've only gotten 2% of the preferences. So I'm eliminated from the count. So that's 12% of the vote that needs to go somewhere else.
And then that gets split up between whoever the individual people put down. Yeah, right.
So the preferential voting is a great way to resolve a 3-way contest. And ideally the best way to win would be the guy with the most first preference votes, because you can't be knocked out of the count that way, because everyone else is below you. Ideally, really, to win, you want more to be in the top 2. But it is possible for you to be lower down on the list, and all the lower preferences just keep building up and up, and you just overtake other people. But even then, if you've preferenced 1 to the person who's mid-tier and comes third in a race of 5, or 5 in a race of 10 or whatever, eventually either you're going to get a majority through preferences, or either with or without eliminating that candidate, so your vote gets transferred. It either gets transferred to someone who either is in the top 2, or it doesn't transfer because the other candidate was just so popular that it didn't matter. So if Michael got 52% of the vote on first preferences, it wouldn't matter if everyone had just voted for Leo. If everyone else had voted for Leo, but 52% of people voted for Michael, then the preferences aren't counted. So basically, candidate B, if you preference candidate B1, you're not stopping candidate C from winning if candidate A is more popular than both of those combined.
That makes sense.
So I'm just looking quickly, guys, at the I prefer the sports bet odds to the polls, and sports bet for the 48th Parliament of Australia saying Labor's paying $1.22, Coalition $4.30, any other result $1.51. So the Coalition's odds have been blowing out, and as per the polls as well. Which brings us, maybe Leo, you might have a say on this, but I certainly haven't been watching it. But Peter, if it is, I mean, who knows? So I noticed Sky News saying the polls are totally wrong today, and that the Libs are very popular. The Coalition's very popular. But how are you looking at? How's Dixon looking? Have you had a look at that? Peter Dutton's seat in Queensland. Leo, have you had a look at that? And it's a 3-way contest now. More obviously, but now there's a teal there, as well as, or the teal calls herself a maroon independent, of course, because in Queensland you don't want to be too allied to the latte sippers from the southern states. But how are you looking? Or David, you might have an idea. Leo, how's Dixon looking?
Yeah, Dixon's interesting. Peter Dutton is still the favourite there for obvious reasons, including the fact that the LNP has been, I know polls recently have been interesting, but has been projected to have a swing. Obviously, also the state results for the LNP being good only a few months ago, combined with the fact that it would be extraordinary for the sitting opposition leader to lose his seat. Normally, you think becoming opposition leader or prime minister tends to give you a bit of a profile boost that maybe protects you a bit. But all of a sudden, Labor is getting a bit more confident. I was speaking to one Labor source recently who was surprised at some of the kind of active and visible support for Ali France, the Labor candidate there. Ellie Smith, I mean, I think I think she should get into double digits. I don't see her winning the seat. I don't see her making two candidate preferred. Ali France has been the candidate 2 times in a row. This is her 3rd go. She's clearly got the profile, and I think she's always been most likely to win it. I think the odds reflect that as well in terms of the gap between France and Smith. I was adamant when I saw a comment about this in January that Dutton would not lose, and I will stick by that for better or worse. I don't see him losing. I might be a bit closer than we thought, but I do not see him losing his seat.
Well, for my money, I definitely would have kept Dutton as well. It would just be phenomenal. It's kind of like the incumbent gets a little bit of an advantage, and I think that probably is true for the opposition leader as well. But if he gets a little swing against him, it'll still scare them. So that'll be interesting. We've got a question from the Patreon, and we will have a link in the description as well if you're interested in joining there and supporting us. So Ika says, how can voting rules be changed? I'm not sure which rules, but maybe it's in the rest of the question. I should read it first. Which election models work better in other countries for other citizens? Their citizens. Is Switzerland a good example? What flaws does it have? And I'm not sure if anyone knows about Switzerland here, but if you do,
I think Switzerland's. I think it's the direct democracy one. My view. I really like Australia's political system. I think we've gotten a lot of the balances right. Sure, there's a few technical things to work out, and it'd be nice if we could expand the House without a referendum about the Senate. But at the end of the day, I think we've got it pretty right. I'm not particularly fussed about going crazy about it, and when you compare it to some other countries, I think we've done it really well, and it works, and it's been basically in place federally for 100 years. So I mean, other countries might work different because of their sizes, which I get, but I think for our country it's appropriate, the model we've got, and I think it works well at the state level as well.
What do you think, Leo, about the fact that just the Greens versus the Nationals, for instance, that the Nationals have so much, the numbers escape me, so fewer votes than the Greens do overall, but they have so many more seats.
I used to be a National. I could tell you about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, look, we've got obviously the benefit of having a bicameral system with the Senate, with single transferable vote and more proportional thing there. Yep. I think the thing about the Nationals separately is at some level a bit blown out of proportion because they're not competing against the Liberals. They are effectively the Liberals in the seats the Liberals aren't standing. I think it's a lot better to look at a combined Liberal National coalition vote. Because at the end of the day, the Nationals are contesting a very little amount of seats. They don't contest in a bunch of states. They don't exist in a lot of states, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think we've got the Senate. I'd be interested in some reforms there, maybe make, seats smaller, etc. But I don't think we need to go crazy. We can have ideal forms of 5-member Hare Clark nationwide, but that's not going to happen. So I don't think it's necessarily as big as some people make it out, just purely because they exist as part of the coalition and they know what seats they're targeting.
Very good answer, mate. So what about everybody on the panel? What's the view on 3 years versus 4 years? I know that 5 years, my sister's a parliamentarian, a minister in the UK government. 5 years is a long time to have that one right you have in a democracy to chuck out somebody from power. But 3 or 4, I'm tending to think myself 4 is better because 3, you get in, you do a bit, and then you've got to get through the next. You suddenly got an election campaign, which has run in a de facto way for months now. What do you guys all think? 3 or 4?
I agree with you, Michael. I think 4 would be better. The only thing is that I think elections are really fun. So, me personally, it's a bit
maybe
hard
every
to
1 year then, Steph, for you. So
no, that's too many. That's too many. No way.
I mean, move
3's
to
the perfect
Tasmania.
number, I think, for that side. But 4, I'd be interested.
David would love it.
I would get so tired. Look, Tasmania technically does have an annual election. Their upper house has single member electorates. They have 15, and they just slowly make their way around the country. So like it's 2 electorates, 3 electorates, and they cycle around. So if you moved to Tasmania and moved every single year, you could vote
Have an election every
every single year.
Let's go,
Only in
Leo. I think
Tasmania.
they should
Let's
have more
go.
senators down there too.
I love it. And Tassie, we actually forget that like next month there is a Tasmanian upper house election, which was pushed back by a couple of weeks because of the federal election. I think it's great what they do. Tassie's got a really fun system in terms of both having bicameral but also proportional lower house. It's all out of whack, and I completely respect them for it. For me, I'm comfortable with 3 years. I think as a small change that can be done without a referendum, a fixed date would be a nice start. So we don't have that horrible speculation about the date going on and on and on. Force fine. I don't want an 8-year term for the Senate. Honestly, as flawed as it may be, and how I haven't thought it out, just a permanent double dissolution for all I care. But look, that's a lot of constitutional stuff. I'm comfortable enough with 3 years. 5 years would be absolutely ridiculous. I don't understand how the UK does it. But the US is even worse because their House of Reps is 2 years and they are in permanent campaign mode 24/7, literally. So don't do that. 3 or 4 is fine by me.
Look, I think all states except for maybe one, I'm not entirely sure, have like fixed 4-year terms. So it is very standard. I see lots of people in the comments being like, every 4 years we have to do this. I'm like, no, it's 3 years or less for federal. So I feel like a lot of people are just used to the idea of 4 years, at least like in the back of their mind subconsciously. But it would require a referendum for that to happen, which people are historically averse to doing. You could imagine the No campaign saying like, "Oh, you don't want politicians to be in power for longer,
forever, the rest of your life."
even though it's 1 extra year or 2 year extra years of the Senate, unless we alter that. So
referendums are a bit like sort of eclipses, aren't they? And Albo just sort of threw that one away. I feel a little
please
bit.
no more referendum campaigns, guys.
So you can
stick with elections for the moment. We've had enough. And I've had one in my lifetime, and that was enough for me.
That was enough.
So I'm good, really.
Well, it's put off the voice has certainly put people off from the monarchy.
It was really ridiculous.
Election, which you would have thought by now would be, given that Australia's an older country than it once was, that we'd be getting to the point that that would be on the table.
It'd be a hard thing to win now, though, because, do we really want to? I mean, look at the US, right? Do we want to be like them, or is it safer to? Oh, England's not that good either, actually.
Well, you could keep the parliamentary system. Obviously, you wouldn't want to be like the US.
That's the other thing, because you could say that we would get rid of it and have a US style one, I guess, on one side if you wanted to. I'm sure they ran that last time.
Absolutely.
Problem is the obvious thing will happen again, which is the slip up over the model, directly elected president versus some appointed thing. Look, directly elected's fine by me because it's another election. And I don't know, Ireland does it like fine. So look, if they had to do that, I still think, the move away from the monarchy will happen in my lifetime. I'm only saying that because I'm only 17 at the moment. So there's a long barrier there.
The rest of us will be dead.
We'll be dead.
Well, we'll see. But
thanks, Leo.
I don't.
Thanks for the memo.
It will happen under an Albanese government, not after the last referendum. I think there will not be another referendum held under Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
No, it'll probably have to be a Liberal one next.
Could I just put in a quick ad? We can't say anything about it because it's under embargo till tomorrow, but we saw in what Channel 9 refers to as the Great Leaders Debate on Tuesday night, a bit of argy-bargy between Albo and Dutton over the nuclear stuff. We've got this story from the guy I consider to be the top new energy analyst in the country coming. We're publishing tonight for tomorrow. And you know how the Labor's saying nuclear is going to cost 600 and Dutton saying, oh, that's outrageous. You say 600, it's only going to cost 331 because that's what Frontier Economics, our independent experts, have said. So this guy said he's actually costed, he's worked out how the coalition's managed to make it look so low, the cost, which despite the high cost remains uncosted. There's no news about how we're going to pay for it. But interestingly, this is one of the issues. I would have thought it should have been a bigger issue because it's a massive spend, and making a country nuclear is a big issue. You know, there was the earthquake in the Hunter region today, which David Shoebridge remarked was 30 k's from Peter Dutton's proposed nuclear power plant site, although it wasn't that high on the Richter. But in any case, this guy, this expert who's very credible, he's costed it and worked out how they've got it so low, and he's got the cost of building 7 nuclear power plants at 4.3 trillion.
Oh God!
So we worked.
Well, we're not doing that then, are we?
No, he's reverse engineered the numbers, how they got there, and effectively they've got there by suggesting, by modelling Australia as a smaller country in 50 years' time than it would be now.
Do you mean smaller geographically? Because pretty big country.
I mean, I also want to jump in this, if that's okay. So, by the way, my name's Josh. I'm the guy behind the scenes here. I live in the electorate that they're proposing some of these nuclear sites, and we had an earthquake this morning.
What?
4.5.
Oh shit!
Like
did
this
you
morning,
Josh, from where you were?
So I could not. I'm right on the edge of the electorate, near the beach, which I'm very lucky to live there. But I had friends in Mayfield, in Newcastle West, wake up at 2 a.m. this morning from an earthquake, 4.5. But that earthquake was in the Hunter Valley. So it wasn't in Newcastle. It was closer to the site there.
I thought Australia was on a solid tectonic plate, and
well, don't forget the Newcastle earthquake of 1989.
Oh, how could I forget?
I felt
we
that
all
in
remember
my
that, except for
mum's
Leo.
kitchen in
We all remember
Sydney.
that.
Oh, I've
What was
had
that?
a
Sorry,
few
David?
Melbourne earthquakes in my lifetime.
I said we all remember that except for Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah, were you alive? To be fair, I wasn't alive when that happened either. So
Yeah, no,
I'll be
Leo
on
just
Leo's
doesn't
side.
no,
respect
it's
it.
just-
That's why he doesn't remember it.
Yeah,
No,
it's
don't
just
rub it in,
genetic
guys.
memory for me,
The rest of us
actually.
do, yeah.
I'm not that old either.
So I'll let you guys transition back into the next question. But
No,
I just
all
wanted
good.
to add
That's
that in
pretty
there.
crazy though. Thanks for the tidbit.
So no
Right.
worries. See you behind the
Jesus
desk.
Christ.
So Steph, what are a
I'll
couple
go
of
to
the
a-
important issues we've got to cover still?
Oh, we're actually speeding through it, Mick, but I've got a question here from Patreon, another one. And we will do some YouTube questions when we run out of stuff to talk about, I guess, at the end. So if you're on YouTube, write in and we'll read some out as well. So this is from Trish Truth. She says, and I think this is one more for, well, actually, it's for everyone here except for me, really. As elections are compulsory, in this country at least, why is it not a requirement for all parties and individuals running to provide basic info on who they are and what they stand for so people can make an informed vote? Over to you guys.
Well, I'd just say there that, look, it's interesting. It varies kind of at state and local. At a federal level, I think most of them obviously do, because they're trying to win. Now, it does get harder with things like, ungrouped independent Senate candidates, these no-hopers who exist out there.
You have they can't go above the line, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and look, they'll never win. But, I think, they should be. I think it's just kind of hard to enforce that. It might be a bit hard to enforce what counts as basic information. The AEC already has a lot to do. And also, if we're talking about like mailing out stuff, that has a lot of complications too. Because number one, the cost of that. Number two, the AEC can't be endorsing or seem to be endorsing any of the material that it would be shipping out as well. Look, at the end of the day, it's up for parties. If parties don't have information, you don't have to vote for them. Obviously, yes, you've got to number everything, but just leave them low in the House of Representatives, and it tends to not have an effect. At the end of the day, it's down to the parties and it's down to the candidates, and it just would be something that's a bit hard to police, especially for the AEC.
Yeah, I mean, they do already have forms they have to fill out when they want to stand up for Parliament, I'm pretty sure. But as far as like how much compulsory information that candidates would have to hand over, I mean, parties do background checks, or they say that they do. I'm not sure how good they are. Some recent example, I think, of a couple of scandals, resignations. I'm not sure if any
a few Section 44s and a few
disendorsements. Section 44s, that's right. But I mean, Yeah, no, you're right. It'd be too hard to sort of police that sort of thing. Although that sort of leads into the truth in political advertising, and there's a lot of just nonsense that happens as well, even post elections, where pre and post, because it's both, right? Like they'll have an election promise that they're going to do something, and then 3 years later they're promising the same bridge or the same road or something like that. I think that there's been a few places identified in Kooyong, actually, not places, but rather promises for the Liberal candidate down there, where we go, wasn't that an election promise 3 years ago? That sort of thing. So, even if they were to lie on getting compulsory information out of people, where they have to say what they believe and stand for and say that they're going to do, it's either lying, but like if a project doesn't get up because it's not feasible or something changes, then you can't exactly arrest them, can you? So yeah, that I'd say that's what makes it pretty much impossible to police. Yeah.
There's also the logistics of getting information out there and how frequently it can change. In this election campaign, we've had a lot of announcements, both to sort of renege on previous policy ideas, but also to announce new ones. And so if you put something in print and like sort of set it in stone, there's sort of like a cutoff element where the party's like, but that's not everything. But yeah, there is this effective like two-way street where, if you want someone's vote, you need to have some way of communicating with them the information that they need to make an informed vote. So that's the kind of motivating factor there. We actually recently had a state election in WA, where I'm from, and I do my due diligence of looking into everyone, and there was a political party called Stop Pedos! Protect Kitties. I think there was also another exclamation mark there. No policies, no website,
just stop
nothing.
pedos. That's it.
Just stop pedos, protect kitties. Unsurprisingly, they did not do very well.
That's some QAnon stuff, right?
Well,
do you mean they didn't have a policy on multinational tax avoidance? That's outrageous.
They didn't have a website.
They're not getting your vote,
Facebook.
Yeah,
I didn't know anything about them other than the name.
And it costs money.
Can I just back up David's point there just as well, because that party, I completely agree with what he's saying. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it. No socials, nothing. What was even weirder was most of the candidates were just first initial. You didn't even have like full names on the ballot, which is really weird. Now, what we do know is that it seems the H. Dolan who was leading that ticket is the Hugh Dolan who has been affiliated with the Democratic Labor Party here in Victoria, who I believe is also the father of the Gen Z party founder, and that party's now dead.
Yeah, I remember them.
But anyway, point being, it was a split in the DLP. So the DLP that exists nationally, and I'm trying not to rant here too much because the whole thing's a bit insane. The DLP that exists nationally basically claimed that this was a copycat DLP that was set up as kind of like a splinter thing. The party barely exists anyway. It's nowhere near the original DLP, when it split as the kind of anti-communist Labor Party.
You might have to break down that acronym, Leo.
Democratic Labor, and then you had Australian Labor Party, anti-communist, ALPAC. Long story short, anyway, stop paedophiles, protect kitties. Yeah, there it is, Hugh Dolan. So very, very little exists about them. And what was even weirder is that, it was not, Western Australia dumped the group voting tickets to control preferences. So it wasn't even something set up there. It just was there and it existed. And it didn't win. And that's that.
And we never saw them
I agree
again.
With David, bizarre.
It's like a ghost sort of spooky story thing. Like that's amazing. Actually, I would definitely listen to an entire podcast episode about that. But it reminds me of, there is a rule, David. This one's for you. I'm sure you'll know this. Where it's not a rule, but when you run for parliament, it costs money to register, right? As a candidate, I think you have to pay something to the AEC. Is that right?
Yes. So I think for the AEC, it's $2,000 to register.
So this Dolan bloke put up $2,000.
Well, it's a state election, so the rules are different. So I think it might have been 5, or is it no? Is it $2,000 for the first 5 candidates, and then after that, it's either free or less money? But yeah, it's literally like probably $10,000 in registration fees, if not maybe more, and not a single social. which confused me so much. And this is this is not the only election where this has happened. I remember in like 2013, I think it was, I was looking through every single party, and there was one that didn't have a website. They kind of had a Facebook page that didn't really update, and it baffles me because this costs money. This is a thing that requires effort. Why don't you want people to actually, like, you won't get elected unless you actually put something out there. So I just
kind of iconic.
I don't understand. Like there are sometimes that, like, there are parties that have like political messages in their names. Like there was in again, I think in 2013, like there was a party running in the Senate that was just called like "Stop the Greens" or something.
Stop the Greens.
That's every other party, isn't it?
Well, yeah, everyone's competing, but this one specifically is like, I'm going to register a political party because I don't like this other one, and that's just it. That their one policy is I don't like them, which is. I mean, like, I understand like that as a statement because it's ultimately free advertising for your political idea, but it's not useful as a personal way to get any political. It might be cheaper just to buy ads.
I think we should have a look into all these blokes, or or lasses, whatever. Is it lasses? I stuffed that up.
Who knows?
Ladies, that's like that would make a good. I would listen to that like esoteric candidates podcast for sure. That'd be very interesting. Not that we could find anything about them anyway. Yeah. So we might. Oh, Josh tells me, by the way, speaking of free advertising, that we're getting political ads on this stream. So
Patriots.
Yeah, who do we get, Josh?
Are you going to get me any money?
Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I don't know who that is. Who's that?
The ghost is in the room with us right now.
Oh, that would be a registered
Taxpayers Alliance. Yeah,
entity.
that's hang on.
Everyone's Googling.
Why don't we Google more? We can find things at the tips of our fingers. We need to encourage that.
Yes,
there's a reason my dad bit the bullet and got a YouTube Premium Family thing. I can't go back to ads on YouTube anymore. If I every time I see a Trumpet of Patriots ad on free to air TV when watching sport or something, it's like I don't see them on YouTube now. And
I disagree. I like all of the political ads. I think they're hilarious.
Here you go, guys. Here's their explanation.
Don't get many.
Let's investigate this party right now, live.
Yeah.
Just
a reminder, everyone. Political things need an authorization statement leading up to an election. You can Google based off the authorization statement if it's a political party or a lobby group or associated entity, I think is the actual term.
Yeah,
that's a good tip. Actually,
Sam Kennard.
You guys at home can do this too, if you want to look up your local ghost party and find out who's running.
And also you can raise questions if you get something that doesn't have any authorization on it. There was the ABC thing about some unauthorized stuff against a legal spender that they can't do that. So if there's no authorization on it, ask questions. You can tell the AEC.
The authorization, by the way, is that bit at the end of the ad that goes authorized by the again. And
I'm not
also at the very bottom
the
of how to
snitch guy, but at this election, talk to the AEC if you see something that is not authorized. Because
if you see something, say something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think it counts as snitching if you're like, hey, now I want you to adhere to proper transparency laws. Like,
True.
It is a transparency
You would say that. You love rules.
Like
that kind of brings up
catch me playing Monopoly on the weekend.
That brings up something that we were looking at before about the AEC having an incident. I think it was 2019, Steph, about some flyers for a Chinese campaign.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Where they had the AEC colours on an ad, core flutes outside voting booths for pre-poll. I think it was pre-poll that had the AEC colours, and all of the writing was in Chinese. So I don't think those were registered from memory. Liberal Party figure admits. So I guess that wasn't.
So you guys should be able to see that on your stream right now if you have a look.
Yeah. So that was not on Liberal Party. They shouldn't have done that.
I think the problem with that is I think a lot of people over the years have kind of wrongly overly attacked the AEC for it. You have to remember the AEC can only administer and only penalise or whatever in terms of like what legislation exists, right? Sure,
So basically,
obviously
you
argue
can
it's
get away
misleading,
with
but they can't
regular
do
rules.
much about it a lot of the time.
Well, that's not good, is it?
Well, they can
Not-
refer
not-
things to the courts, but
They never
you
do.
know,
Correct.
they do, but if you're saving something that is dodgy to like election day, like if you release it earlier, like the court can have an injunction and be like, take that down, and then temporarily freeze that until if they make a ruling, if they're like, oh, actually that's fine, you can put it back up. But if you
And
do it on
parties love
election
doing
day,
that, by the way. They're always looking for mistakes so they can dob
you
each other
can't
in.
get an injunction on the day. So yeah, it is just a difficult thing to enforce. I don't
But
know
if there's
what
no
the penalties
penalties,
are
then you could really
retrospectively.
you could
Well,
run
this
wild
might
with
be a
it.
question for Michael. Obviously, like there was a lot of movement with the truth and transparency in political advertising, which didn't get up, obviously. But would those powers be directed to the AEC, or would they come under a different government body?
Well, they could come under ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, which is the media regulator, communications people. You could put it give anybody authority really, but there was a poll done by TAI the other day, I think even this week, which found that 89% of people, and I'm a bit sus about polls, it depends how the wording is, if the question is framed, but they said that 89% of Australians wanted to see truth in political advertising. So, it is pretty scandalous that you can say anything you want. You could slag off anyone in anything, only restrained by defamation laws. But truth doesn't come into it. And the major parties don't want to change that because essentially they're the ones with the big advertising budgets, and the electoral reforms, which effectively have cemented their ceiling at, I think it's $80 million each, and to the debt, because they can move money around to marginal seats and so on within that 80 million funding cap, whereas the smaller parties can't do it. So, the majors have made an effort, in terms of legislation. It was a complex set of laws. The detail was definitely buried, but, it's against third parties. And what we do know, and actually, I defer to you guys on this, on your views on it, like we do know there has been a long-term trend away from voting for the major parties to third parties, minors and independents and minor parties. So, this election, I think, will be very interesting to see whether that trend occurs. The Teals are pretty hopeful of holding all of their seats. I'm not quite sure about increasing them. The Greens will probably hold. It'd be interesting. I don't know whether, David, for instance, is it your gut feel that trend will continue, the trend away from the majors at this election?
Well, I'm no Anthony Green. I'm not good at making any predictions, but I mean, it has. This is not like a recent phenomenon. It's just that like it has been in decline for like decades at this point.
Yeah,
for like 2 decades. So,
Mm.
it used to be very reliably that like the major parties would get the majority of the first preference votes, and the more first preference votes you get, the easier it is to stay in the count. The last election, we're seeing a very large dip in major party votes, first preference votes, and so that's what has allowed us to have these like 2-way or 3-way contests where other people have managed to get elected. So I'm not sure what impact that'll have. Maybe some people might feel safer in a definitive majority government, or some people might be motivated by saying like, oh wait, all this time I thought that only major parties win and my vote doesn't go anywhere. Might see that, oh no, that isn't actually true, and might be motivated to vote elsewhere. So
It's very
I can see
interesting.
how it would work in 2 different ways for different people. But yeah,
the
way we
demographic,
find out
that's
is
been
on the
pretty
day.
well reported, I think, as far as like, young voters moving away from major parties and people being disillusioned. And we saw that last election as well. But it has been interesting to see, some new ads. The Better Australia ad that we couldn't load earlier in the podcast, they mention, that having a minority government is dangerous. And I haven't seen that messaging be, from this angle, at least this time around. So Interesting that both the major parties now have this group where they're saying, you know, ooh, don't vote independent from both sides. It wasn't very sophisticated. I think that everyone should go and have a look because it's pretty funny. But
Yeah, I
we're
can have a go at loading it, Steph. I'll have a go at loading it. I'll have a go at loading it for real.
We've got to get
when
to
you finish your
questions. We're
sentence.
going to do a couple of YouTube questions before we close out, though.
Very true.
We've got about 5 minutes left.
Should we get Leo on that move to the Leo? What are you thinking on the
yeah,
move
30
to
seconds, Leo.
Yeah, no, I think it will likely continue. I think also the Senate is one that needs to be watched at this election. You have different races where the Lambie Network, Legalised Cannabis, One Nation, the Libertarians are all amongst those that play for kind of the final seat. And the Senate makeup's going to be important in terms of whoever forms government. They're going to need these minor parties to pass. And look, we're a lot of right-wing minor parties are having their infighting. I'm not sure if people have seen it because it only just came out. But Trumpeter Patriots is now, I've never seen this before for a party that really ideologically is similarly aligned. Trumpeter Patriots ran an ad where they called One Nation evil, quote unquote,
Wow.
which is very explicit. And again, I've never seen that before. But yeah, they just said at the end of the ad, they are evil. I thought I was mishearing it.
You'd
So
think Clive
that's
is
be
writing
interesting.
them himself. Clive
But
says
look,
things
Trumpeter
that are pretty
Patriots,
outrageous.
yeah. But look, Trumpeter Patriots, I think, is going to get under 1% in this election. They're not running in every seat. People are mocking their name. They are clearly not. They don't have the gas of the other campaigns.
No, they don't have the COVID pandemic to trade off
Clive
either.
Palmer isn't leaving it. And look, even 2019, I think it is overstated the impact that Palmer preferences had or Palmer recommendations. The coalition almost certainly would have still won that eletion.
It scared them
regardless.
at Coalition HQ, that's for sure. But outside of the
True.
bubble,
The biggest Palmer impact was 2013 when it was Palmer United and they had group voting tickets and it was a bit more populist. And since then, they just really haven't been able to do anything. Exactly, 4, and they had the weird Senate recount as well.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right. Do we have some questions from the YouTube live stream before we close out? We've got about 4 minutes.
So a lot of the questions we've been already answering tonight. So I'm going to pick one that I quite like. And obviously, people are liberal on how they want to answer this question. If you don't want to answer it, that's totally fine. But I'm just going to pull it up here. Here we go. So you guys should see that on your screen now. Cool. Steph, can you read that out for us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. From Gladys Geragiclian, which, good name.
Incredible.
Is Gina Rinehart having any sort of impact this election? Good question, yeah.
I think she helps the Liberal Party through funding and through her, funnily enough, her patronage, although the left is, pretty down on her. It's just money. It's just money for the Libs. And ultimately, because of that 80-20, engagement thing in politics, people just see ads and it goes into their subconscious, even negative or positive ads, doesn't matter. They go in this. If you've got the money, people don't spend millions on grassroots, so-called grassroots astroturfing campaigns and, smearing digital ads unless they know that they work, and they do work because they go into people's subconscious. And that's why they should be bringing in truth in advertising laws.
Didn't
so
Gina say that she was
impact is strong because it gives Dutton the sort of aura of somebody who's allied to people who are efficient at business. It's the Trump sort of motif, isn't it? That I'm a great businessman, therefore I'm going to run the country better. Of course, there could be no greater fallacy, but that I think helps him in electoral terms, apart from just the dollars going in. But one thing, just quickly, on that right, on these astroturfers, this is effectively foreign interference, and you could put a case to the AEC. To go and check it out, because you've got the pro-Israel lobby there that really nothing to do with the interests of Australians. And then you've got the fossil fuel money coming through lobby groups like APIA, Australian Petroleum Producers, and so on. Very powerful, because this is how the oil and gas guys don't pay any tax or royalties, or very little. They do it because their lobbying is, supreme. They're just in Canberra the whole time and having shindigs the whole time. So most of them are unlisted, overseas owned, Chevron, Exxon, all these things. And the ones that are Australian owned, like Woodside, BHP and Rio, or Rio isn't an oil and gas producer, but, these guys, they're 80%, 90% foreign shareholders because they're such big companies. So it's effectively foreign interference driving a lot of the money, the dark money that goes into this election.
Yeah, Gina's sort of everywhere and nowhere in that way. I thought she said she was going to move all of her money overseas when she took out that full-page ad in The Australian with Trump hugging the American flag. That was quite good.
Well, if she took it to America, she would have been slaughtered because since Trump's come in, there's been a multi-trillion
drill, baby,
dollar
drill, right?
exit of capital. No, America's financial markets are on the brink. I mean, people are taking money out of America and putting it into Europe and Asia and everywhere else. That's why the Commonwealth Bank's been running on the ASX this week, because it's a safe haven from Trump. So if Gina put her money there, she would have lost a lot of skin over the past couple of months.
So yeah, I think Australia picked up some of the exports market that China would have been getting from the US, I think, as well. So, good for us. I'm not sure what industry that was, but beef, I think. Beef, yeah.
And just to keep our
do we have time for one more?
Yeah, so look, we're pretty much out of time though. But we might throw to our two wonderful guests closing statements of the podcast. What's a good question to ask? How do you think? How are you?
Who do you think's going to win?
That's a question that's too easy. But do you guys expect any different outcomes from this election? Is there, obviously, for example, millennials and Gen Z are the biggest voting bloc for the first time. We're coming into age now. Are we going to see any unexpected trends that we haven't seen in our history before? Is there anything that we should be looking forward, well, not looking forward to, but looking out for at this election? Or is it business as usual?
Great question. Look, I don't know about upcoming trends because, I don't have a crystal ball, but I believe we have, a record high amount of people enrolled to vote. As you mentioned, Gen Z and millennials now are a massive voter bloc. They're larger than baby boomers now. And what I'm really excited for is a record amount of people to vote, because ultimately we can make a lot of assumptions and we can talk about the impact that different players and parties have. But in the end, really, it is us, the people, that decide who we want to represent us. So I'm excited for there to be a record amount of people voting, however they so wish. And I hope they do so informed.
That's pretty much the outro that we wrote, actually. You just did it for us. Don't waste your vote.
You're done. Sweet.
Well, thanks, David.
The only vote you
Leo,
waste is the one you don't cast.
Yeah, look, I'd say I'm also excited for a lot of people to vote. I think, as I said before, right, look for the Senate. It's going to be some interesting results. I suspect in the House, a larger crossbench. I think, again, minor parties and independents have good chances right across the board. I wouldn't be surprised if the vote for the major parties combined gets even lower than last time, if the coalition sinks a percentage or two, as some polls are indicating they're basically on par with Labor, which, again, would be extraordinary compared to other results. But look, in the end, I'd say please be informed. Make definitely a formal vote amongst all other things, but also just be conscious of the fact that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and also as much as you have your right to be skeptical. Also, let's not flat out if you're partisan one way or the other. Let's not pretend polls are completely inaccurate or wrong, because the major polls have a very good track record. They have been accurate many times. We don't need to go nuts about them, as we've seen some claims. So I think people should just be informed, ask questions about it, and enjoy voting. I got to wait another 3 years for a federal election, but
I was just about to ask you about it.
You're on the cutoff, mate.
No, I'm born in November,
yeah.
so I'm 18 in November. So I get the 2026 Vic State election. If John Pizzuto goes later this year, we might have a by-election here in Hawthorn, so maybe that. But
so exciting.
as it's scheduled, I got to wait until 2028 for a federal vote, which is nice because I can avoid the questions about who are you voting for one more federal cycle.
One more time, that's true. Yeah, thanks for that, Leo. Thank you, David, as well. And I'll just reiterate what Leo said. Use your vote wisely. And there is a lot of misinformation around. We're going to try and cover as much of it as we can, as we always do on Michael West Media, whether that's on the website or on the YouTube channel, and now the live stream podcast thing as well, whatever it is we're doing here.
Our first official one.
Is it?
It is. We did the pilot last week. So, yeah, thank you so much, guys. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with the quality this time.
That's good, Josh.
Yeah, thanks,
I'm glad
guys.
I
Will
did
be
your
very
stuff.
interesting and enjoy it.
Yeah, check us out on Patreon. There's a link down below, and we'll try and get to some more YouTube comments next time. Thank you, David. Thank you, Leo. And thank you, Michael. And thank you, Josh. And thank me as well.
And David and Leo, where can we find you guys, by the way? Just a little shout out to yourselves where we can find your socials.
Auspol Explained on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, obviously. I don't use Twitter. And also I make sure that all the information in my videos is done through audio, at least the important stuff. So you can also find it on Spotify as well if you want to learn without having to look at a screen.
Wow, Spotify.
Yeah, and I'm Leo_Puglisi, 6 the numeral, on Twitter. Other than that, 6 News AU on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky, and YouTube as well. I think you can just look up 6 News and find us. And for the website, 6newsau.com. And if you want to support us, patreon.com/6newsau.
Brilliant.
Rock and roll. I just want to say a big thank you to our host, Steph, tonight as well. First time on the channel. First time on the live stream on the channel. So we're going to sign off now. Thank you, everyone,
Thanks,
for
everyone.
joining in for the West Report Live. We will see you soon.
See you, everyone.
And we are out. Bye.